All right, I want to thank you for joining us today for our webinar on counter sales, entitled Counter Sales Because POS is a Double Entendre. Now, we chose this title because we wanted to make sure we drew a distinction between counter sales in the SalesPad environment and what would more traditionally be called a POS system. So hopefully we'll highlight the differences as we go through this. But nonetheless, counter sales is really kind of set up as an additional feature within the SalesPad Desktop product to give you the capability to process a faster transaction in more of a counter sales, parts counter type environment. So this is perfect for distribution companies that also allow walk-in customers to allow you to efficiently process those orders, those cash and carry type sales. So we'll kind of go through this presentation and just kind of hit on some of the features of what it does do, what it doesn't do compared to other traditional point of sales systems, and then we'll also talk about some of the hardware that you can integrate to really round out the customer experience. As we go through this, Sam Rector, the product marketing manager, will be online and answering any questions that you may put into the question box. Please feel free to use that throughout the session. And I will also be standing by after the session to answer any follow-up questions that you may have. So let's go ahead and jump into this, and we'll start by talking about the counter sales features. So the first thing, as I mentioned, is really stripped down and intended to give you a much faster order entry experience for those sort of walk-in parts counter sales. So quick order entry is probably the biggest thing that it provides. Now, we like to say that it also includes many POS type features, and we'll get into more specifics in that regard as we go through the demo. So, scanning products in to build out the sales order, end of day reports to know exactly what your cash drawer did throughout the day. So those sorts of things. So we'll kind of go through that. Another big advantage of the counter sales is that it's fully integrated with the GP inventory. So being a part of SalesPad's fully integrated, talking to the same database, so is our counter sales environment. So when you complete a sale, that inventory is immediately adjusted and reflected out once that invoice that you've generated through counter sales is posted. So you're maintaining an accurate perpetual inventory without having to do any additional syncing or any of that sort of activity that you would typically do with another third-party point of sale system. Also, it's included with your desktop license. So you have it, it's available. You just need to turn on the security settings if you want to go ahead and use this. So now getting to some of the points related to it, and why we do not consider it a true POS system. So there is no offline mode. So if that's a requirement, we want to make sure that you understand that it does require a connection. It's also not going to do the traditional syncing with the database, but like I said, it's actually integrated directly to the database. So as you're processing these sales orders, posting them as invoices, those are immediately reflected in your perpetual inventory quantities. So as I mentioned, we also integrate with a number of hardware components to really round out the point of sale type experience. So in terms of hardware options, if you need to have a signature capture like a Topaz pad, we do support that. We also support the APG 100 cash drawers, and we have scripting that we can deploy to pop that drawer at the completion of the sale. Thermal printers for receipts, USB tethered scanners for scanning out the barcodes to build out the sales order. And then also, most recently, we have EMV payment capabilities where if you want to run a PAX D210, which you see pictured here, terminal, you can do that, and that will allow you to do chip and pin payments for card-present sales. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the demonstration. We'll walk through a couple of transactions to see what they look like, and then we'll also circle back to look at some of the supporting elements like the store and drawer setup, the end-of-day report, and the locking screen for the end users. Again, Sam Rector standing by throughout the demonstration to answer any questions that you may have, and I'll be hanging out after to, again, answer any questions that you may have. Okay, so jumping into the demo, I've got my counter sales screen opened up. And just so you know how I access this, I went through my application and then went to counter sales, and that's what you're seeing now. Now, as with any screen in SalesPad, if you right-click on the tab of the screen, you can actually choose to untab this if you want. And so if you want your end user to have a very clean screen where the only thing they're seeing is the counter sales environment, none of this additional menu up at the top, you can actually do that by untabbing. So just kind of talking about the screen in general, what you're seeing here. As I mentioned, it's really meant to strip down and make it a very simple order entry process where you basically have two steps. You're going to add your items through the sales entry tab here, and this is what it always defaults to. And then you're going to go right over to checkout and collect the payment for that order. Now, if you have an existing customer that walks in and you want to generate the order for that existing customer and not the generic walk-in customer profile, we of course have the customer search screen that you can access an existing customer to apply that order against their account. That would of course add that additional step to look up the customer, but that is an option that you have there. Now, as far as adding items to the sales document itself, so this is the sales entry screen, we have some options there. So we have the traditional sales inventory lookup, where if we hit the ellipsis on the line item, I can go ahead and bring in my full complement of item SKUs. I can use a combination of item numbers, descriptions. If I have user-defined fields that I want to pull into this to search by, I can of course bring up my column chooser and add any of those additional fields to filter down to the specific item SKUs. When I get to an item SKU that I'm looking for, we also have the full complement of inventory visibility. So if you want to see what you have on hand, what warehouses they're in, you do have that visibility from the counter sales environment. So just wanted to point that out. Now, in addition to that traditional item lookup through the sales inventory lookup screen, you can of course use a USB tethered scanner. So if you have a barcode on your product and you want to quickly scan that out, you can go ahead and do that, and that item will appear on the entry. Now, if you want to scan multiple, we do have an increment by scan function that will continue to increment the quantity for that single item as you scan more and more. So you can see I scanned that HD 24 times and I've got a quantity of 4 now on my sales document. So that's kind of the second method. So traditional inventory lookup, you can use tethered barcode scanners. The third option is really what we call sales entry quick pick, and this will allow you to build out category view of all of your products that you can then drill into to get to the specific items. So in this case, as you can see, I've got kind of a hardware store built out with bearings, fasteners, hand tools, so on and so forth. And if I click on one of these categories, it will take me to either another category or right to the item level. In this case, when I selected fasteners, it got me right to the item level. And I have these products that I can then go ahead and add to the document. So I can hit plus minus to add quantities, and then simply click on the image, and that will add that product in that quantity to the order. Now, the quick pick is actually compatible with touchscreen, so if you have touchscreen deployed in your counter sales environment, you can go ahead and use the touchscreen, tap on the image, tap on the plus minus buttons, and that will add the item to the document. So now that I have my items, let's say the customer is ready to check out, I can hit F12, that's the shortcut key to get to checkout, or I can hit checkout here, and that will take me to the checkout. And I'm going to move this over a little bit, scrunch that up a little bit on the screen. But you basically have 3 parts to the checkout screen. So you've got the payment option selection, where you're going to actually choose which method of payment you're going to collect over here on the left. Then you've got your total with the balance open right here. Once you apply your payment, it will actually show you the change as well. And then you've got kind of your summary of the order with all of the sort of tax information and everything on the right pane. So for this sale, I'm just going to use cash as my checkout. So I've got a total of $92.84 due. Let's go ahead and say the customer tendered $100. I'll go ahead and put 100 in, and we'll go ahead and save that payment. And so you can see that that payment of $100 cash is now saved. The change is now displaying $7.16. Again, when we submit this, if you want that cash drawer to pop open automatically, we can do that. We can also auto-generate the printing of the receipt as we submit this as well. So I've got that order entered. I've collected my payment, I've tendered my change back to the customer. I can go ahead and submit this. And this is an actual order. I've designated an order type in my counter sales environment. So this is going to go to wherever you've specified in your workflow. So in my case, all of the products are kind of handled in the back of the store through the warehouse. And so this order that was captured in the counter sales parts counter environment is going to automatically go through to the picking queue where whoever is responsible for picking that and bringing it to the front of the store for the customer to grab is going to go ahead and do that activity. So you can see there's the confirmation of that actually going through to the picking queue. And again, once I've submitted that, it's flowed through. That's an actual live document in the SalesPad GP environment. Perpetual inventory will be impacted accordingly. The payment's applied, and it automatically pulls me back to the sales entry tab to process the next customer. So that was an example of a walk-in customer. I wasn't really concerned with capturing a bunch of details. They weren't a repeat customer. I just wanted to capture the items they wanted to pick up and process the order quickly and efficiently. So that was kind of the walk-in scenario. Now, if you have a customer that it exists and it's repeating and you want to make sure that you capture this sale against their account to make sure you're tracking all of the sales history for that customer, you can, of course, jump back here to the customer search, and you can then look up, this is your full customer lookup. So if you're looking for Aaron Fitz, I can begin typing that in, and they will appear in the drop down here. And then once you have that customer selected, you not only can process the order for that customer, but you can also look up things like sales document histories. If you want to access some of their previous orders, you have all of that visibility right here. But if I want to process an order for Aaron Fitz through customer or through counter sales, I would just click on that customer record, and now you can see instead of walk-in customer, Aaron Fitz is over here in my summary for the order, and I can follow the same process now. So if I want to build out my order, I can scan my barcode to increment my quantity, jump right over to checkout. Now, if it is a customer and they do have a card on file, you can process payments that way. So I can select my payment method and go to New Charge, and this will actually give you access to PayFabric, which is our third-party payment processing tool that allows you to store customer wallets. And in this case, since they are a customer that I do repeat business with, I do have a wallet set up for them. And so I can actually process that out with their existing wallet if I choose to do so. So right here I can process the transaction, and then that will go ahead and process it against their default credit card. And then again, I can submit this. That will go out to whatever workflow queue I've defined, pop the cash drawer if I need it to pop, print the receipt if I need it to print, and then take me back to the sales entry screen. Now, let's say you have a walk-in customer and they have a card present scenario. We also can provide tools to process those types of payments. As I mentioned in the intro, we do integrate with a number of terminals, the PAX D210 being one of them, and that's actually what I have here today, and this will allow you to process chip and pin type payments. So the process for entry stays the same. We would just scan out our products, jump over to checkout, and when I select, I'm actually going to do a new payment, new charge, and just process that charge straight away from this screen here. So this will launch our PayFabric transaction processing screen. And in my environment for today's demo session, I have it set to default to the EMB type transaction because that's what I'm assuming I'm going to be processing here in this counter sales environment. So you can see this loads up. It confirms my terminal. In this case, I am using that D210 terminal. Loads up my transaction amount and then gives me an option to use credit card or use debit card. When I make this selection, it's going to defer to the terminal to suggest that I follow the prompts on the terminal, when to insert the card, when to confirm, when to back that out. So we'll see that happen next here. So as I select use credit card, the terminal will now go through a series of prompts where I will go ahead and capture this payment. The terminal has recognized the sale of $29.43 and is asking me to insert my card, so I'll go ahead and do that now. And once I've inserted the card, it will run that transaction. If it is PIN and it's debit, you can enter your debit PIN, or you can just confirm and move on to run credit. And you can see that the transaction is approved. I also get a message in SalesPad that the transaction is approved. I get a prompt to remove my card, and then we'll see the transaction right to the transaction capture grid there in SalesPad as confirmation that that payment was made. So far we've looked at 3 different transactions. We had a sale of a walk-in customer that paid via cash. We had a sale for a customer we've done business with previously that wanted to use the card that we have on file for them. And then we did a third transaction with a walk-in customer that paid with a card where we processed out the chip and PIN payment. Now let's look at a fourth type of transaction where we're actually going to do an exchange. So I have my customer search tab that I've selected, and I've looked up my customer Aaron Fitz Electrical, and once I have that customer highlighted, you can see that in the center we have a number of different things that we can do to search a specific historical invoice. So in this case, I've filtered down and I've got this invoice number 1700013. So we're actually going to process an exchange for this invoice right within CounterSales. So with that document number highlighted, I'm going to select exchange, and this is going to pull up the line items that were originally sold on that invoice. And so here you can see we've got item number 10005, the brake caliper assembly inner, and they originally purchased 200. So they want to exchange those because that was the wrong product. So we're going to select that line. We're going to hit OK, and that's actually going to bring that line item in as a negative quantity on the sales order entry screen. So you can see sales entry automatically had this populate. And now let's say they wanted to purchase a different product. It was the 1004. Which happens to be the brake caliper assembly outer. So they purchased the inner, they actually needed the outer in this scenario. So we're going to go ahead and plug in the 200 line quantity, and then we're going to jump right over to the checkout process. So in this case, we should see just the total due, which is the difference between the two lines that are being returned. In this case, $481.50 is now due, and I'm going to go ahead and process out a cash payment for this, and we'll go ahead and enter that in. So we'll do 500 was tendered, and we'll save that payment, and we can see $18.50 is now due back to the customer, and we'll go ahead and submit that. And this is actually an invoice that I've designated as my exchange invoice, so that jumped right to invoice, whereas the previous transactions you saw that order go through to the picking queue. So we had the negative line quantity and then the new item that we're selling out to replace that. Now, one caveat with that, if the value of the product that's being returned is greater than the value of the product being purchased or exchanged with, we can't process that because we cannot do a negative dollar value invoice. So in that case, you would start the process off just like you saw. We would look up the customer, we would find the posted historical invoice, and then we would actually do a return for the full value of that initial purchase, and then do a new invoice for the product that they're purchasing out. So that would be kind of a case where you'd use the return over the exchange. So now with that, we've looked at 4 different types of transactions from the sales order entry interface within CounterSales. And now let's jump back and kind of show some of the additional supporting functions that you get with the CounterSales environment. The first being the lock screen. So this little icon up in the upper right-hand corner will allow you to view and turn on the lock screen. So if you want to lock out your screen, if you stepped away for a break, maybe it's your lunchtime and you want to kind of lock it out from any other user to access it, you can simply select lock, and then that will require your password to get back into that environment. And you'll notice that as I hit this drop down, the lock screen also indicates the store and the drawer that I've been assigned. So in addition to the lock screen, we have a store and drawer setup that is done through your setup utilities and store setup. So on the store setup side, you can have several store names, you can have several drawer names within each of those store locations. You can define a unique walk-in customer profile for each of those locations, and then you can assign users to those store and drawer combos. So this is where you would actually set that up in the back end. Now, with the store and drawer setup, we also provide reporting. So if you want to run an end-of-day report for a specific drawer in a store, you can do that. So if I go to my reporting option and my quick reports, you can see I have an end-of-day report here. I can go ahead and select that. I can pick my begin date and end date for this report. In this case, I'll just pick the date. So I've accessed my quick reports here, and I've gone into my end-of-day report, and I've selected my beginning, my end date. I can also pick my store name. So in this case, I'm at the Redmond store and I'm drawer number 1. And when I hit refresh on this, this is actually going to show me all of the transactions that occurred throughout the day at that store location. And it's also going to break it down by payment method. So you can see what payments were made via cash, what were done by credit card, and we can do subtotals on the bottom of those 2 different payment types. And we can also print this directly from this report view. So if I want to print this report, I can use this printed copy to kind of compare what's against my cash drawer at the end of the day. And that concludes today's demo. Thanks again for joining us. Sam will be posting a link to the counter sales fact sheet on the meeting so that if you want to explore more information, you'll have that information at your fingertips. Again, I'm going to be sticking around to answer any questions that you may have, so continue to submit those through the chat box. And if you have any questions about counter sales, if you're not currently using it and it's something that you want to deploy in your environment, please get in contact with your sales rep and they'll be able to guide you on next steps on how to do that. Again, my name is Matt Greyerbeihl, and thanks for joining us today.